I'm Claire Dawson, the only gravedigger in the world who can cure any rare and bizarre illness by unearthing the root cause hidden beneath ancestral graves. I don't do medicine. I don't chant spells. I just dig. And I've seen the kinds of curses that would make the bravest man piss himself. So when Eleanor Carter, the revered matriarch of the Carter family, offered me $100 million to visit their ancestral tomb in hopes of curing her grandson's mysterious limb degeneration, I didn't hesitate to say no. Not because I didn't know how, but because I knew exactly what would happen if I said yes again. In my previous life, I did dig up their crypt, fought through blood-soaked nightmares, confronted the evil spirits that haunted that cursed land, and healed Ethan and Ryan Carter completely. The reward? They inherited a fortune worth billions, became Wall Street's god-tier stockbrothers, and were worshipped like legends. But me? The woman who made it all happen? On the day I found out I was pregnant, those two monsters carved my belly open with their own hands and forced me to kneel before Vanessa, Blake, the daughter of their dead nanny, and the faker who stole my credit. It was Vanessa who saved us, not you. Ethan spat, as if his memory had been swapped out with pure delusion. If it weren't for you, she would have given birth to a child for each of us and become Mrs. Carter. Then they buried me Ollie Vane Vanessa's grave. And guess what? The evil spirits I once banished came back for revenge. I died with nothing left of me but a story no one would hear. But fate? She has a sick sense of humor. Because when I opened my eyes again, I was right back at the moment when Grandma Eleanor first came to beg for my help. Please, Claire, she pleaded, her eyes clouded with desperation. If we don't save them, the Carter family ends here. And just like that, I knew I had been reborn. With the memories of every betrayal burned into my bones, I looked her dead in the eyes and said flatly, if they're sick, call a doctor. I'm just a gravedigger, not a miracle worker. The color drained from her face, and her knees buckled like she was about to collapse. Miss Dawson, you have a gift. You've saved so many wealthy families. I'll do anything before she could finish. The door burst open with an obnoxious slam, and Ethan Carter stormed in, limping arrogantly with his cane, like he was born to ruin people's lives. He shoved me aside and barked, Claire Dawson is a fraud. Digging up graves to cure diseases? Are you hearing yourself? Grandma, he sneered, Vanessa Blake is the real cure. She's got a medicinal body, natural, sacred, and willing. Behind him, Ryan Carter hobbled in on crutches with half a calf and a whole lot of delusion. He leaned on Vanessa like she was his holy grail and said, if we take turns sleeping with her for 7 consecutive days, our limbs will regenerate. No meds needed. My blood ran cold. Not from shock, but from the sharp snap of memory, the torment, the betrayal, the way they grinned while I bled out. I wanted to vomit. I watched Grandma's trembling hand reach out to Vanessa, half believing, half doubting. Can you really save them? Vanessa blinked with fake humility, her lips curling smugly. The Carter family has treated me so well. Of course, I'll offer my body to save its heirs. Ethan dramatically waved away the offer of $100 million. We don't need your scams anymore. Take your fake tools and leave. Grandma frowned. Ethan, that's enough. Claire has a good reputation. She's helped countless people. But Ethan wasn't having it. He practically dragged Grandma away, then whipped around and grabbed a fistful of my hair. You think you're clever, Claire? Playing hard to get? Trying to wiggle your way back into the Carter family? My scalp screamed, but I didn't. Instead, I stared him down. And in that moment I saw it. The flicker in his eyes. The glint of familiarity. He had been reborn too, which meant he remembered everything. Including how much he had loved me once. Including how he destroyed me anyway. He wasn't confused. He was cruel. I shoved him off with all my strength and said coldly, Mr. Carter, control yourself. For a split second, he looked shocked. But it didn't last. Don't think acting noble will make me let my guard down, he hissed, then turned to his brother. Ryan spat on the floor near my feet, glaring. She needs to be taught a lesson for stealing Vanessa's credit. And that's when it happened. A dozen hired thugs stormed into my house. Glass shattered. A vase exploded. Furniture toppled. I scrambled to stop them, but Vanessa stuck out her foot and tripped me like a playground bully. Everything in here is stolen. We're just delivering justice, she smirked. I hit the floor hard, shards slicing into my skin. Blood spilled instantly. I watched helplessly as one of the goons reached for my gravedigger's toolbox, the very tool that connected me to my ancestral powers. Don't touch that, I screamed. Ryan picked it up and smashed it like it was garbage. You little fraud. You don't get to give orders here. Then he turned to the men. Break everything. Strip her naked and toss her to the street rats. Let them have some fun. My stomach twisted. Their faces lit up with obscene glee. Hands reached toward me, grabbing, squeezing, violating. One guy even slipped his hand under my skirt. Why waste her on strangers when we can enjoy her ourselves, he jeered. My whole body shook. The pain of my wounds was nothing compared to the humiliation, the helplessness, the sickening familiarity. It was happening again, just like before. My eyes burned with tears, and I screamed through clenched teeth. Ethan Carter, laugh while you still can. Those legs you're so proud of? They won't be yours much longer. And I meant it, because I could see them clinging to him like leeches. The evil spirits. They were already gnawing at his thighs with delight. And only I knew, the reason the Carter brothers suffered from this disease was because their ancestral grave held something dark and unclean. If I didn't break the curse, they'd lose not just legs, but arms, torsos eventually turning into twisted, limbless pigs. And this time, I wouldn't lift a single finger to save them. You'll pay for what you've done to me, I whispered. Ethan froze for a second, then slapped me over and over until my face was swollen and bloody. Still got attitude, huh? Well, Vanessa's curing me just fine. I'll recover soon. Ryan wasn't done either. While I was coughing up blood, he ripped open my shirt. The men circled around again, hands eager, eyes gleaming. I whimpered, please don't, and then, like thunder cracking through a nightmare, a voice roared from the doorway. Anyone who touches Claire Dawson dies today. I turned my head, barely able to see through blood and tears. And there he was. Daniel Ross. The one man I didn't expect but desperately needed. The second Daniel Ross's voice thundered through my wrecked living room. Everything froze. The thugs who were just pawing at me a moment ago turned pale, their hands jerking back like they'd touched fire. Behind Daniel, a line of sharp-suited bodyguards stormed in with military precision. In seconds, the dozen or so brutes who'd trashed my home were knocked to the floor, groaning and begging for mercy like whipped dogs. Bloodied, bruised, and still trembling, I was pulled gently to my feet by Daniel's bodyguard as he wheeled Daniel toward me. Despite being in a wheelchair, Daniel exuded the same calm, dangerous energy as a storm about to break loose. Miss Dawson, he said gently, his eyes scanning my wounds with unconcealed worry, I apologize for the intrusion. A year ago, you saved my life. And recently something strange has started happening to me again. If you're willing, I'll pay $200 million, just please help me once more. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly on the wheels. I looked down at him, shocked. His sleeves had shifted, revealing faint fish scale-like patterns on his arms. Before I could speak, Ethan sneered from across the room, pushing through the wreckage with Vanessa clinging to his side. Well, if it isn't the freak show from the Ross family, he scoffed, sizing Daniel up with mockery in his eyes. The half-mermaid monster has come ashore again. What's wrong, Daniel? Couldn't find a fish tank big enough to hide in? Ryan chuckled beside him, high on his own delusions. You actually brought bodyguards? For her? Bro, she's a scam artist. You're gonna hand over $200 million to someone who plays in dirt for a living. I ignored them. My heart was racing, not from fear this time, but from the realization that Daniel's symptoms weren't just a fluke. The scales, the relapse site meant the Ross family tomb still had unresolved evil inside. And it was my fault. I hadn't dug deep enough the first time. I kneeled beside Daniel and slowly lifted his shirt. The scales shimmered in the light, sickly and unnatural. I pressed my hand against them, then turned to glare at Ethan with sheer disgust. Daniel's not a monster, I said coldly. He has a disease caused by the same thing that's eating you alive. Your family tomb is cursed just like his. Ethan snorted. You're seriously pulling this graveyard mumbo-jumbo again? Vanessa snorted louder, let's be real. Daniel just wants to sleep with you. He probably got his scales from rubbing up on some pond weeds. You want to play this game? I looked Ethan square in the face. You said if you and Vanessa keep having sex for 7 days straight, your limbs will heal.
Great.
I'll cure Daniel in 7 days too. Let's make it a bet. The room went silent. Ethan blinked. You're serious? Dead serious, I replied. You think I'm a liar, a scammer?
Fine.
Let's see whose method actually works. After 7 days, let's see who's cured and who's crawling. Ethan's expression twisted. He clearly didn't expect me to challenge him like that. You want to bet?
Fine.
If Daniel still has scales in 7 days, I'll auction your virginity to the highest bidder. Daniel's eyes flared with anger, but before he could speak, I put a hand on his arm, holding him back. And if Daniel is cured, I said coolly, you give me your right to the Carter inheritance. $50 billion. Ryan barked a laugh.
Deal.
And if you're wrong, I'll throw in my $50 billion too. That's $100 billion total. You better not disappear when you lose. Vanessa crossed her arms, smirking. And what happens if I can't cure them? Are you gonna throw me into a dungeon? I didn't hesitate. If you can't cure them, I'll make sure you lose your limbs too. You can become the matching human pig bride of the Carter brothers. Her jaw clenched, and she looked to Ethan and Ryan for support. They both nodded arrogantly. Let's draft a life and death contract, Ethan snapped. I want her handprint on it in blood. I smiled. Gladly. A notary was called. The entire event was streamed live, and word of the insane bet spread like wildfire through Ravens Hill. By that evening, everyone in the upper class was watching the drama unfold like it was the Super Bowl. Gamblers placed bets most backing Vanessa and the Carters. After all, she was the beloved nanny's daughter with a sacred body, and I was just a dirt-stained gravedigger. I ignored the circus. I didn't have time for noise. That same night, I rebuilt my spiritual digging tools using sacred wood passed down in my family for generations. The original axe had been destroyed by Ryan, but I still had materials. The spiritual wood, bathed in ancestral blood, was the only thing that could dig without disturbing the feng shui of the tombs. 2 days later, I followed Daniel to the hills where the Ross family crypts were buried. As soon as we arrived, a bone-deep chill ran through me. The wind howled unnaturally. The ground throbbed. Something was waiting. Everyone stay back, I warned. And don't speak. I sliced my finger and let blood drip onto the earth. Then I bowed 3 times and slammed my new spiritual tool into the ground. Instantly, the soil shook violently. A crack split open, and dozens, maybe hundreds of giant centipedes swarmed upward, screeching and hissing. One of them bit my leg hard. Another latched onto my arm. I grit my teeth, heart pounding, and poured a mixture of slaked lime and white phosphorus into the pit, followed by a fire starter soaked in black dog blood. The explosion was immediate. Flames erupted, engulfing the centipedes, charring them to ash. I collapsed, exhausted, and Daniel rushed forward, catching me just as I fainted. When I opened my eyes again, I was in his arms. His gaze was full of worry, and his hands were shaking. I explained through ragged breaths, someone placed cursed objects in the Ross family tombs. Bat Cave, Phoenix Cave, Toad Cave, Chelan Cave, these are the 4 favored spots for spiritual tombs. They placed a snake in the Bat Cave last time. This time, a centipede in the Phoenix Cave. The feng shui's been completely reversed. That's what's turning you into that. He nodded slowly, trying to understand. Drink this, I said, pulling out a black vial from my pocket. It's made with gold arowana. All the scales will fall off within 2 days. I passed out again. When I woke up, Daniel was sitting beside me, holding my hand, his expression full of unspoken affection. That week, the Carter brothers spent every day on social media mocking me, hyping up their supposed miracle cure, and hinting at the upcoming auction of my body. But I didn't care. The clock was ticking, and I had work to do. On the 7th day, Daniel and I arrived at the Carter estate. He wore a hoodie and mask to keep his skin hidden. As we walked through the gates, the crowd jeered. Look, the fish freak showed up. Why is she still wrapped up like a mummy? Can't even show her failure. Guess she'll be naked and auctioned off by sunset. I just smiled at Daniel. Ready? He nodded. I tore off his mask and cloak. The crowd gasped. Daniel's skin was flawless, smooth, and glowing with life. His eyes were bright. He wore shorts and a t-shirt, healthy and human in every sense. Who's the liar now? He said calmly. Claire Dawson cured me by digging up a grave. And I'm living proof. The silence was deafening until someone shouted, What the hell? Is this real? Wait, what if the Carters lied to us? Did we just lose millions betting on Vanessa? Panic spread. Gamblers realized they'd been duped. Before the crowd could explode, someone yelled, Wait, we haven't seen the Carter brothers yet. Don't jump to conclusions. People rushed into the Carter mansion, expecting a smug victory. Instead, they found Eleanor Carter weeping on the sofa while Ryan sat in a wheelchair, his face pale, his entire left leg gone. He kept his head down, ashamed. Oh my God, someone gasped. He really lost a leg. What the hell did they do for 7 days? Did Vanessa suck the life out of him? Just then, Ethan's voice echoed from the stairs. Who said we lost? Everyone turned. He strutted down without crutches, his gait steady. Gasps and claps filled the room. For a second, even I hesitated.
But then I saw it.
The glimmer of rot under his skin. The black aura clawing at his back. The evil spirits. And I knew this wasn't healing. It was a time bomb. The moment Ethan Carter threw away his crutches and strutted down the stairs like a peacock in mating season, the entire room exploded in applause and shock. He's walking. He's completely cured, someone shouted, and the wave of voices that followed was full of awe, disbelief, and instant betrayal. So it's true? Vanessa really did it? Damn, we all owe her an apology. My hands clenched involuntarily. Not because I was jealous or threatened, no. I was cold with fury, because while the crowd gasped over Ethan's so-called recovery, I was the only one who could see them, 4 of them, to be exact, twisted, faceless spirits clinging to his shoulders like maggots on rotting flesh, gnawing steadily at his arms. Those weren't signs of healing. Those were the signs of an imminent breakdown. Ethan Carter didn't stand victorious, was a walking corpse on a timer.
And Ryan?
I didn't even need to see him fully to know the truth. 8 ghosts, ravenous and territorial, were latched to him from head to toe like he was an all-you-can-eat buffet. One look at the way he curled up in his wheelchair like a hollow shell, trembling and pale, and it was clear his soul was being eaten alive. But Vanessa Blake, dressed in designer heels and a nauseatingly smug expression, practically bounced down the stairs behind Ethan like she'd just won Miss Universe. Claire Dawson, she purred, I told you I could save him. I warned you not to underestimate me. She waved a hand, and the same group of men who'd torn my house apart stepped forward again. Time to pay up. A bet is a bet. Let's get the virgin auction started. Grandma Eleanor looked confused, startled even. Auction?
What are you talking about?
It's nothing. Ethan laughed it off. Just a private arrangement. Private. I cut in sharply. You mean like the part where you promised to hand over your $50 billion inheritance if I cured Daniel? Which, by the way, I did. Vanessa crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. Technically, it's a tie. Ryan didn't recover, but Ethan did. So no one really wins. I let out a small laugh and pointed toward Ryan, still slumped in his chair like a discarded doll. Your brother is sitting there missing a leg. What part of that looks like a tie to you? Or is Vanessa's magic body only strong enough to save one man at a time? Ryan shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. It was the first time he didn't bark back or insult me. I saw something flicker in his eyes: regret, fear, maybe even desperation. I tilted my head and addressed him directly.
Ryan.
You remember, don't you? He looked up, his eyes glassy. I do, he whispered hoarsely. I remember everything. I know you're the only one who can really help me. His voice cracked, and to my utter shock, he tried to stand. With one leg. He collapsed instantly, but clawed his way forward anyway, dragging himself until he was kneeling in front of me. Claire, I'm begging you. Please go to our family tomb and save me. I'll give you my $50 billion. I'll be your servant for life. Just don't let me end up like this. The entire room froze. Grandma's eyes widened. What is going on? Why is he begging her like that? Ethan, what the hell happened? Ethan turned beet red, grabbed Ryan by the collar, and slapped him so hard the sound echoed. Get up. You're embarrassing us. She's lying, she's manipulating you. I stepped between them calmly, smiling coldly. If I'm such a liar, Ethan, why did you and Ryan take turns having sex with Vanessa for 7 days straight? And only one of you could walk away whole. Coincidence. Vanessa's face twisted. Shut up. Medicine isn't perfect. I delayed Ryan's symptoms. That's better than nothing. If it weren't for me, he would have ended up like some limbless freak. Newsflash, I snapped. He did end up like a limbless freak. You just sold him hope like it was a designer handbag. Daniel appeared beside me, placing a gentle hand on my back. Let's go, Claire. They're not worth your time. But Ethan wasn't done. Seeing Daniel so close to me lit a firestorm in his ego. Claire Dawson, he snarled. You pathetic slut. You'd rather be with a fish boy freak than me? And before I could react, he lunged at us, blind with rage. Daniel stepped in front of me instinctively, but before Ethan could touch either of us, he stumbled.
Hard.
There was a wet sound, a sudden metallic smell, and then screams. Ethan collapsed to the floor, howling in pain. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking the floor. Someone shrieked. His legs. Oh my God, his legs theory gone. Grandma fainted. The smell hit the crowd and people gagged. I rushed forward, ripped off Ethan's pants, and confirmed what I already suspected. The prosthetics were gone. Underneath, there was nothing but mangled stumps and festering wounds. He was never cured, someone gasped. He's been faking it all week with prosthetics? What kind of messed up scam is this? Vanessa's eyes widened in horror as she realized the lie was crumbling.
No.
That's not possible. He was walking. We were sleeping together. He was fine. Ethan writhed on the ground, screaming Vanessa's name. You said the prosthetics would fuse with my body. Why are they falling apart? Why is it getting worse? Ryan, still kneeling, started laughing. Bitter and broken. This is karma. We trusted you. And you've doomed us. He doubled over, laughing and crying at the same time, sounding like a madman unraveling at the seams. People backed away, horrified. Grandma came to and burst into tears, staring at both grandsons like they were unrecognizable. What did you do to them, Vanessa? What did you do? Vanessa, cornered, pointed at me like a cornered rat. She did it. Claire's the witch. It's her black magic that made Ethan's legs rot. Interesting, I said, tilting my head. So I'm the witch? But a week ago you said I was a scam artist. Now I'm suddenly powerful enough to destroy your golden boy with a glance. Vanessa panicked. She cursed him. I swear. But Ryan had had enough. He hurled a glass across the room, barely missing her head. You cursed us.
You're the reason we're like this.
We had a chance, but you made us destroy it. Then he turned to me again, tears in his eyes. Claire, please save me. Save what's left. Grandma clutched my hand, her frail body trembling. Miss Dawson, I was wrong. I was so wrong to trust anyone but you. I can give you everything, the family fortune, the houses, the land. Just please save my grandsons. Let them live and repent. That's all I ask before I die. And for a moment, my heart almost softened. Almost. But I looked over at the shattered remnants of my toolbox, the blood still staining my clothes, the trauma still echoing in my bones, and I knew. Even if I wanted to save them, I said gently, it's too late. They destroyed the tools I needed. Even if I rebuild them, and we rush to the Carter family tombs now, it won't be enough. Ethan has less than a day. After that, he'll lose both arms. He'll be a true human pig. The room went silent except for Ethan's groaning. Ryan, I added, you've got 3 days. Maybe. But even if I dig up the tomb, I can only stop the curse from spreading to the rest of your bloodline. The limbs you've already lost? They're gone for good. Ryan's face crumbled. Ethan's sobs became animalistic. Vanessa stood frozen in the corner, shaking, staring at her own belly like it had betrayed her. I looked her dead in the eye and said, you think you've won because you got pregnant by one or bought off them? You've inherited their bloodline. Which means soon, You'll start to degenerate too. And you'll become the first ever pregnant human pig. And for the first time in all this madness, Vanessa screamed not with rage, but with sheer primal terror. The moment I dropped that bomb on Vanessa that she would soon suffer the same limb degeneration as the Carter brothers because she was pregnant with their cursed bloodline, her face turned deathly pale, and her smugness shattered like glass under a hammer. She stumbled backward, clutching her stomach in panic, her eyes darting between Ethan, who was still writhing in a pool of his own blood, and Ryan, who was sobbing and begging me for a second chance. No, this can't happen to me, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, her breath shallow, voice trembling. I don't want to turn into a monster. I don't want to be like them. I can't carry this thing inside me. And then, without warning, she screamed and bolted toward the marble table in the middle of the room like a woman possessed. Before anyone could stop her, she lifted herself onto the edge and slammed her abdomen down on the sharp corner with all her strength. The sound of bone and flesh colliding with stone echoed through the room like a car crash. Blood gushed down her legs instantly, staining the expensive rug beneath her feet. She collapsed, wailing, her makeup streaking down her face as she clutched her stomach and moaned in agony. I don't want this child, I don't want to be cursed, I don't want this bloodline in me. The entire room froze in shock, but Grandma Eleanor, despite her age and the emotional shock, rushed over like a lightning bolt and grabbed Vanessa's wrist before she could do more harm.
No.
Don't you dare touch that baby again, she screamed with the kind of desperation only a woman who's lost everything can muster. You can die, I don't care, but that child is the only living bloodline of the Carter family left. That baby must live. My heart clenched. For all the pain her grandsons caused me, Grandma never once treated me unfairly. In my past life, she was the one who arranged my marriage into the Carter family, offering me a third of their fortune just to fulfill her late husband's wishes.
She was always kind to me.
Seeing her now on her knees, begging and crying over the last shred of hope her family had left, stirred something painful in my chest. I hated Ethan and Ryan, but I couldn't bring myself to hate her. Then, as if she hadn't already sacrificed enough pride for one lifetime, she turned to me again and clasped my hands in hers. Claire, please, she whispered, you can ask for anything. All of the Carter properties, all our assets, I'll sign them over to you. I don't care about Ethan or Ryan anymore, but I beg you save the rest of our family. Save this child. At least let this child live, so I can face my husband in the afterlife and say I did my best. I stared into her tear-stained face, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. I turned slightly and looked at Daniel, who had been silently watching everything unfold with calm, unwavering eyes. He reached over, brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, and smiled softly. You're a good person, Claire, he said in a low voice only I could hear. No matter what decision you make, I'll support you. I inhaled sharply, then turned back to Grandma and gently helped her up. 3 days, I said. Come to my house in 3 days. I'll bring the tools I need and go with you to the Carter ancestral tomb. We'll find out what's really going on and save the innocent ones. But Ethan and Ryan, I paused and glanced at the brothers, Ethan shaking and bleeding, Ryan trembling on one knee. You'd better arrange proper wheelchairs and caregivers. There's no saving them anymore. As if on cue, Ryan started screaming. No, I don't want to be a cripple, I don't want to be in a wheelchair for life, I don't want to be a monster. He thrashed violently, his one remaining leg kicking uselessly against the floor. Ethan, however, had gone quiet. Too quiet. He lay on the ground, blood caked around his thighs, breathing raggedly, eyes glazed over like a man watching his own fate unfold in slow motion. And then, he lifted his head and looked at me with something I hadn't seen since our wedding night in my past life softness. He didn't speak at first. He just stared at me, as if trying to memorize every detail of my face. Claire, he rasped, but before he could say more, Daniel took my hand and gently pulled me away. There's nothing left here for you, he said. Let's go. But Ethan wasn't done. Despite having no legs, he used his elbows to drag himself across the floor, smearing blood in long red streaks, inching closer and closer to me until he reached my feet and collapsed. I don't expect you to save me, he said, voice hoarse, eyes wet with tears. I know I'm beyond redemption. But I need to say this, I need you to know I was wrong. I was so wrong. His face was twisted in grief, desperation, and something else that felt too little too late love. I didn't want to admit it, but I was jealous. I hated that you had power, that you didn't need us. I thought Vanessa was what I wanted because in my last life, after you died, she killed herself and everyone called her my white moonlight. I thought that meant she was the one. But I was miserable. I drank myself to death trying to forget your face. Now I know it was never her. It was always you. I looked down at him, his lips cracked, his eyes hollow, and felt nothing.
No hatred.
No pain. Just emptiness. I had already mourned this man. He wasn't my Ethan anymore, hadn't been for 2 lifetimes. You got what you wanted, didn't you? I said, voice even. You chose Vanessa. She's pregnant. You'll raise a child together. You should be happy. My words made his expression crumble. He began sobbing like a broken child. No, it's not what you think. I don't even care about the baby. I just want you to forgive me. Grandma covered her mouth and turned away, tears streaming down her face as she watched her proudest grandson reduced to this. But I had no more to give him. Not my forgiveness, not my sympathy, and definitely not my love. That version of Meth one who waited for his affection, who dreamed of being the Carter family's daughter-in-law, died screaming in a grave 7 feet deep. I turned my back without another word and let Daniel lead me out, his hand warm and steady in mine. Behind me, the Carter mansion crumbled into a pit of chaos, blood, regret, and curses. The great gambling match of the century, the one where people bet on my humiliation, ended in silence and disgrace. Vanessa was locked in a private medical wing by Grandma Eleanor's order, guarded 24/7, with a team of doctors monitoring her pregnancy around the clock. The Carter family had no room left for risks. Their last heir had to survive, no matter what. As for Ethan and Ryan, they were sent to a private hospital under false names. Doctors couldn't explain their condition, limbs vanishing for no medical reason, wounds that wouldn't clot, bones dissolving into mush. They tried everything. All they could do was disinfect, sedate, and wait. Ryan still clung to hope, begging for me every time a nurse came in, asking if I would come and save one more piece of him. But Ethan stopped speaking entirely. He just lay there, staring at the ceiling, unmoving, like he was already halfway to the grave. And when I finally opened the Carter ancestral tomb 3 days later, armed with freshly rebuilt tools and a team of experts, I found exactly what I feared: dark ritual dolls buried at the core, curses etched into bones, and demonic talismans soaked in blood. Someone had deliberately sabotaged the Carter lineage. I lifted the curse and protected the rest of the family, but it was too late for the two who had paid the price. Ethan became a complete human pig, no arms, no legs, no voice, just a soul trapped in rotting flesh. Ryan retained one arm, but mentally he was gone. He refused to eat, speak, or even open his eyes. They were strapped to their beds, fed through tubes, their lives preserved not for healing, but for punishment. In the end, Ethan left behind a voice recording for me. I never listened to it. I threw the USB into the trash without a second thought. 10 months later, Vanessa gave birth to a healthy baby boy carrying the Carter name, and died on the delivery table from an amniotic fluid embolism. And on that very same day, under clear blue skies, Daniel Ross knelt before me with a 10-carat diamond ring and whispered, "Claire Dawson, will you marry me?" For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I smiled without pain. And I said yes. People thought that after everything, after Ethan lost all 4 limbs, after Vanessa died giving birth, after I walked out of the Carter mansion holding Daniel's hand like the ending of some twisted drama, that I would disappear, fade quietly into the background, and enjoy the peace I'd earned. But no, peace isn't something people like me get handed. Not when your past was buried in blood and betrayal. Not when you've looked death in the eye twice and come back angrier each time, and definitely not when the baby Vanessa left behind, the last bloodline of the Carter family, was now being raised under 24-hour surveillance in a penthouse guarded like a presidential suite, with Grandma Eleanor holding him like he was the reincarnation of every mistake she'd ever made, which, in a way, he was, because every time I saw that child's face, all I could see were the bodies, the lies, the humiliation. The grave they shoved me into, and the look on Ethan's face when he realized too late that the only woman he ever loved was the one he destroyed. And maybe that's why I didn't hate the baby. Maybe that's why I made sure he had the best formula money could buy, the safest crib, the warmest room, because he didn't ask for any of this. And besides, if I had the power to curse a bloodline, then I sure as hell had the power to protect one too. So I did it quietly, without announcements or headlines. Just actions, like sealing the spiritual perimeter of the Carter tomb once and for all with sacred ash and black dog blood, laying a silent protection circle around that penthouse crib and making sure that the sins of Ethan and Ryan would never bleed into that child's life the way they bled into mine. And while Grandma Eleanor thanked me with trembling hands and a voice full of gratitude, I saw the guilt in her eyes, saw how it never really left her. How, even after giving me control of the Carter fortune and naming me the legal guardian of the heir, she still looked at me like she'd wronged me beyond repair, and she had, but forgiveness wasn't a favor I gave to feel noble. It was something I gave to finally put my own soul to rest. So I let her apologize, let her cry, and I accepted it all with the quiet dignity I didn't have the luxury to show when I was crawling out of my own grave. Because now, I wasn't the Carter brothers' victim, I was the woman who outlived them both and walked away with everything. And speaking of walking away, the media still hadn't gotten over the fact that Daniel Ross proposed to me the same day Vanessa died, that he announced it in front of reporters with a diamond that blinded everyone for 3 blocks and declared that the title of Mrs. Ross belonged to no one else but me. And while people argued on talk shows about whether I was a gold digger, a witch, or a misunderstood genius, I didn't bother to respond, because I didn't need their validation. I already had Daniel, and Daniel was the only man who never asked me to kneel, never forced me to explain my worth, never saw my power as something to fear or exploit, only something to protect. And he showed that love every single day, from the way he made my tea with exactly 3 drops of honey to how he memorized the days I didn't talk much because the memories were too loud. But just when I thought I could finally breathe, just when I thought the curses were buried for good, something happened that made my blood run cold again. The baby started crying, not just regular baby cries. No, this was a wail that sent chills through the air, sharp and ancient. The kind of sound that doesn't belong to a newborn but to something far older, far darker. And when I rushed into the room, I saw him writhing in his crib, his tiny limbs covered in faint red markings that glowed under the moonlight, and I knew instantly someone had tampered with the seal. Someone had tried to curse him, and not just anyone, no. This was the work of a professional, someone who knew how to bypass spiritual barriers, someone who wanted revenge, not on the Carters, but on me, and I acted fast. Burning a black dog bone under the crib, chanting an incantation that hadn't been spoken aloud in a century, smearing my blood on the 4 corners of the nursery, and just like that, the curse shattered, but not before I caught a glimpse of the entity that sent it. It wasn't a ghost, not exactly, more like a summoned spirit with hollow eyes and a mouth full of broken glass, and it hissed a name before it vanished, Brielle, a name I hadn't heard in years, not since my mother's funeral, not since I found out the truth, that I wasn't the only spiritual practitioner in the Dawson bloodline, that I had a twin sister who died during childbirth, but whose soul never moved on, a sister whose anger had been festering in the underworld, and now she had found a way back, through the weakest member of our bloodlineath Carter heir, and suddenly it all made sense, the intensity of the curse, the personal nature of the attack, because this wasn't about the Carters anymore, this was about me, about blood and betrayal and unfinished business. And I realized with terrifying clarity that if I didn't stop her, if I didn't face her, the next grave I dug might be my own, or worse, Daniel's or the baby's. So I turned to Grandma Eleanor, who was trembling in the corner, clutching the child like a lifeline, and I said, "No one leaves this house without my permission. From now on, everything that enters or exits will be spiritually cleansed. I'm not just guarding this heir, I am protecting the entire bloodline." And she nodded, too stunned to argue, because she saw the seriousness in my face, the way my eyes didn't blink, the way my hands didn't shake, and Daniel was already by my side, dialing his security team, upgrading the alarms, fortifying the perimeter, and I knew I had maybe 3 days, maybe less, before Brielle tried again, because that's how these things work. They test your weakness, they find a crack, and then they come pouring in like floodwater. And so I opened the old chest I had buried under my altar, the one sealed with 7 locks and forbidden prayers, and I pulled out the final artifact my grandmother left me before she died, a blood mirror that could summon the dead for one final conversation, and I whispered to it in the dead of night, "Brielle, I'm ready." And the mirror shimmered once, cracked down the middle, and then her voice came through, soft and venomous. "So you finally remembered me, sister." And I stared into the darkness of the reflection and said, "I didn't forget you, just weren't ready to face me yet." And that's when she laughed, low and cold, and promised, "I'm not here for the baby, I am here for you, Claire, and when I'm done, you'll wish you stayed buried." And just like that, I knew the final chapter of my life hadn't been written yet, because sometimes the only thing more terrifying than the curse that almost killed you is the one that shares your blood. After that night, I didn't sleep, not even for a second, because once you speak to something from the other side, you can't afford to close your eyes, not when your twin sister's voice is still echoing in your head like a lullaby dipped in poison, not when the air around you feels heavier, darker, like the veil between worlds is thinner than it should be, and especially not when the baby, the last living heir of the Carter family, won't stop crying at exactly 3:03 a.m. every morning, the witching hour, the hour when the dead stir and the weak break, and each time I picked him up, his tiny fingers would cling to mine like he knew something I didn't, like he could feel her too, whispering to him from the shadows, telling him stories no infant should understand. And it didn't matter how many sigils I drew, how many protection circles I cast, how much sacred oil I smeared on the windows every night. She came closer, stronger, more vivid, her voice louder, her laugh clearer, until one night, the mirror didn't just talk, it bled, dark red tears spilling from the cracks as her face pushed through the glass like she was trying to claw her way into my world, and I stood there, shaking but unflinching, because if she wanted a fight, she was going to get one, but not on her terms, not in my home, not near my child. Yes, that's what I called him now, mine, because I may not have given birth to him, but I gave everything else, and that made me more of a mother than any cursed bloodline ever could. And Daniel saw it too, the way I'd hold him, hum to him, guard him like my soul depended on it, and maybe it did, because as the days passed, I realized this wasn't just about Brielle wanting revenge, it was about her wanting to replace me, to steal everything I'd rebuilt from the ashes of my past life, to wear my skin, my name, my legacy. And she chose the one vessel connected to me by both blood and fate, the child, and that's when I knew I had to end it, not just protect, not just delay, but truly end Urbanish her spirit back into the void it came from and seal the breach between our worlds for good. So I made a decision I hadn't made since the last time I nearly died. I packed a bag, left the baby with Daniel under 7 layers of spiritual wards, and headed back to where it all began. The Dawson family crypt, the place I swore I'd never return to, the place where my mother was buried, and my sister was supposedly still bound to her cursed fate. And as I stood before the cracked tombstone that had my mother's name half erased and mine freshly carved from an old spell circle I once used to call lightning, I could feel Brielle watching me, amused, expectant, like she knew this was the only way it could end, and I knelt, cut my palm, and let my blood drip into the soil, whispering the invocation that would summon her fully. No more mirrors, no more half-ghosted visions. And the ground split open with a sickening groan as fog poured out like something ancient had exhaled for the first time in centuries, and then she stepped out, barefoot, glowing, looking exactly like me, down to the scar above my right eyebrow and the crescent-shaped birthmark on her wrist, and she smiled like we were old friends meeting for brunch. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice honey and venom, and I stood, steady, focused. "You're not welcome here," I replied, and she laughed. "Neither were you, Claire, but you made it work, didn't you?" And I knew then that this wasn't just a battle of curse, it was a battle of identity, of which twin got to live and which one got left behind, and she blamed me for being born first, for being the one who breathed while she choked on amniotic fluid and rage, for being loved while she was forgotten, and while I couldn't change the past, I could make damn sure she didn't get to rewrite the future. So I drew the final seal on the tombstone, one that required my blood, her essence, and a truth no spirit could deny. And as she lunged at me, her eyes glowing black and her nails turning into claws, I didn't flinch, I didn't scream, I just stood my ground and whispered, "I forgive you." And the seal lit up in blue fire, encasing her in light so blinding she shrieked, not in pain but in disbelief. "You don't get to forgive me." "I didn't ask for it," she howled, But forgiveness wasn't about what she wanted, it was about what I needed. And I needed peace. Not revenge, not power, just peace. So I kept repeating it. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. Until she dissolved into ash and silence, until the wind stopped blowing and the fog retreated, and the tombstone cracked cleanly down the center like it had fulfilled its final purpose. And I collapsed to my knees, exhausted, sobbing not from fear or grief, but from the overwhelming relief that came with letting go of something I'd been holding onto for 2 lifetimes. And when I finally returned home, Daniel met me at the door with the baby in his arms, his eyes rimmed red like he hadn't slept the whole time, and he pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. It's over, I whispered, and he kissed my forehead and said, then let's start living. And we did, slowly, with scars and stories and the kind of quiet joy that only comes after surviving something impossible. And as the years passed, the baby grew up strong and healthy, never showing signs of the Carter curse again, because I had rewritten his fate with my own blood and will, and Daniel and I built a life together, not perfect, not easy, but real, full of laughter and late-night tea and lazy Sunday mornings where he'd trace circles on my back and tell me how proud he was to be mine, and sometimes I'd still dream of graves, of mirrors that bled and voices that hissed, but I always woke up to sunlight and the sound of tiny feet running down the hallway, and I'd remind myself that this was real, this was earned, this was mine. And when people asked who I was, I never said I was a witch or a gravedigger or a ghost survivor. I just smiled and said, I'm Claire Dawson, mother, wife, protector of the living and the dead, because in the end, that's what I was, and that was more than enough.